All right, we're live, and I'll be off now. Okay, all the best.
Okay, thank you, Ranjit. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Barbara and Sanjay. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a Global Waste Dialogue session on how best to involve communities in waste management initiatives. So just a brief introduction to myself. I'm Zoe Lenkiewicz. I am a waste communications specialist. I've got some experience of community involvement in waste management initiatives in the UK. We also have Barbara Herridge. Would you like to introduce yourself, please, Barbara?
Yeah, I'm Barbara Herridge. I'm External Relations Manager for North London Waste Authority. We manage the waste for about 1.87 million people in North London. So we're a disposal authority. We do disposal and recycling. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. And Sanjay Gupta.
Hi, my name is Dr. Sanjay K. Gupta, and I work with Skat Consulting in Switzerland. And I primarily work with communities on waste management, including the informal sector.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think that this afternoon's discussion is going to be particularly interesting, I hope, because what we have is we have the experience of somebody operating in North London, and of Sanjay who's operating in India. And I think from the discussions that I've had with you both so far, there are lots of similarities with community involvement actually over waste management initiatives, but also some interesting differences. So I'd like to start by talking about stakeholder analysis and how you find the groups that you need to communicate with, how you break those groups down, and sort of manage to start the dialogue with those groups. So Barbara, perhaps you could enlighten us first from your experience, please.
Yeah, I think if we're starting off from a standing start, say we're doing something in a new area, then obviously we tend to try and initially talk to the local councils, so that would be the borough councils who collect the rubbish rather than us who do the waste management. They often have very good links already with community groups in their area who are not necessarily specialists or interested, even particularly from their name and title, in waste or environmental issues. Then we already have an outreach team that does a lot of work on waste prevention, encouraging people to reduce waste, particularly food waste. So I would talk to them as well in another instance. And then the third thing I'd probably do is I'd probably look at both published sources, and certainly for consultation we've just done, our contractor runs existing waste facilities in North London. They have people visit those. So for data protection reasons, I can't usually have that information directly. They can't pass me people's details, but they can send things out on my behalf to say, are you interested? Would you like to be involved in something? So that's usually how I'd start, and then probably run some above the line communications activities saying something's happening, or would people like to come to a meeting, or that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Okay. And then that messaging, would that be online or through local magazines, or what kinds of
real mix? Real mix. We'll use social media, face-to-face engagement, newsletters to residents maybe, adverts in the local press. We'll piggyback on other people's emails, for example, if they're willing to do that. So, for example, if a council is sending out an email to an existing list of community groups, we might ask for something to go in that. Yeah, the whole range of communication methods. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, great, thank you. And Sanjay, how about you? When you're I know your experience has been with well, you've had quite a lot of experience with people who are already working or operating in the waste sector informally. And so how do you go about finding your stakeholder groups and communicating with them?
Good. In my experience, particularly of the developing countries, I would say that engaging with the community uh, is a primary requirement, both in terms of ensuring their participation as well as ensuring the initiative sustainability. And to add to this fact, I would say that in developing countries, particularly where the waste management services are not adequate, say for example, low-income communities, slums, and other marginalized group, it becomes all the more important. And one can use various tools to engage them. I won't say social media is a very popular thing, but what has worked is physical contact. So preparing a team of volunteers, visiting house to house, telling them about what services they can expect, what they are expected to do, for example, in terms of segregation of waste or disposal, in terms of timing. I think community planning has worked much better in my experience in developing countries, say for example in Sri Lanka, in India, parts of Vietnam, than not having. So I would take the risk of engaging with the community than not take the risk and fail. So there are cynical groups. I mean, I'll say the groups which think this is not the most essential part, but there are majority of them who would like to participate, who would like to contribute, and there are concrete examples which I can cite where when you share the planning, when you engage a different level of the stakeholders, you prepare a list of the stakeholders, you engage them one by one, then you put them all together. I think it also solves a lot of other problems in terms of if you are running short of a little bit of fund, if you are running short of a little bit of help in kind, that all comes through. So for me, I think community participation should be an essential part of waste management planning.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I think Barbara, you've probably got a similar experience in terms of, you know, the face-to-face contacts and the value of that, and also if you could touch on this element of risk that Sanjay brought up.
Yes, of course. I mean, I agree completely with what you said, Sanjay. It's, you know, it's important, essential to involve communities in these kind of issues. The issue of risk, I think, is more about the results might be more unexpected. If you know, people will come up with suggestions, they will have ideas, they will ask questions. It's more around the unexpected nature of the outcomes of the engagement, I think, that, you know, you might see as a risk, and also not being able to anticipate the level of interest in the issue that you're trying to engage the community on. You know, for us, for example, we've been working on food waste for several years now and engaging people in that, and we know people are interested because there's a personal benefit, they can save money, and we know very well what tips and tools and advice we can provide. Engaging people in something like I did some work engaging people in our waste management strategy, the development of our strategy, and sometimes that can seem very remote, it's long-term planning, it doesn't seem so immediate. So I think one of the risks, though, is that particularly if maybe you have a group comes forward and represents the community or a particular community, you must guard against not engaging with other people in that community who might be affected or might have something to say. I think for us as waste managers, you can see it, oh great, I've got some meetings to go to, existing groups to go to, but there might be other people out there who are a silent majority, for example, and that's where you need to think about, I would say it's worth considering a whole range of tools for engagement. And I think the other risk potentially that I've experienced in the past, not so much recently, is you don't necessarily know what people's experience of community engagement is, not necessarily in a waste perspective, but in something else. And they may feel either disillusioned by the process, or they may feel that their voice wasn't heard on something else previously, and it's difficult to know that if you're not working in that community day to day. So I think that's where community leaders can come in and provide a sort of, give you some initial feelings about the group, about an area. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think that's an interesting point. So Sanjay, do you ever encounter problems with engaging people, depending on the nature of the project? Do you also find that it's more or less easy to engage people, and sometimes winning over the hearts and minds, so that they are encouraged to participate?
Let me start with giving you some concrete examples. In projects where it depends on where it is on primary collection and segregation, I think it's very essential that you get your plan stamped with the community's agreement. Most of the time, or let's say majority of the times, what I have seen, that when you put a plan in front of the community for primary collection and segregation, if the community puts a stamp to it, the chances of its success are much more than what it would be in another case. For example, most of the time they come out with some brilliant suggestions in terms of what time the collection will be good, in terms of who are the people who will segregate, in terms of giving some of the secret community feedbacks, like in which street we may not expect good quality participation. So that's the kind of thing that helps in improving your plan and to see that it works. And once the community has given its feedbacks, it basically has stamped your planning process, that they will participate and they will try to see it happen. This is particularly. But the same community, if you discuss with them in terms of processing and disposal, probably you will not achieve more. So in a different scenario, when you are doing say for example a dump site or landfill improvement program, there also the community engagement who are directly impacted by such a plan becomes very, very essential. So engaging with the community on dump site improvement, which I've been doing more recently in Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, in India, is a much better strategy than otherwise what happens, the community ends up putting a public interest litigation or a legal case in the court, and then nothing moves on. So you don't have improvement, the community doesn't get any benefit out of the plan that you intend to do. So I think even in other scenario where a community is directly impacted by a plan which you intend to see, it becomes very, very important that you engage them. So for me, exclusion is not the way. Inclusion in planning, inclusion in the dialogue is much better way to the solution in waste management than exclusion.
Absolutely. Barbara, do you have... Sorry, we lost you for a moment there. I hope
yes,
you got what Sanjay was saying. So Sanjay was saying about always making sure that we're inclusive in how we involve the community, which is actually a similar point to the one that you made a moment ago, isn't it? About, you might have some existing community groups and existing community leaders, but there's also often a large silent majority that we have to engage with and take their considerations into account as well.
I'd agree with that, and I'd also say that sometimes communities will come forward throughout the process, and ideally your process should be able to cope with that. For example, I would say some work we've been recently doing, some of the community groups that I spoke to didn't come forward until we'd finished our first stage of community consultation and communication. They came forward in the middle of two formal, we were in quite a structured formal process, and they came forward in the middle of those, and we still need to be ready and willing and actively prepared to go out and talk to people. And although we say, well, you can't respond, or we can take you around the site, we can explain what's going on now. Your next point at which you can formally get involved is here, and the next point after that is here. So I think it's about making sure your process can cope with the fact that communities will be interested at different points potentially as well, and some may not come forward until, if it's a new waste facility, for example, until you're actually starting to build it, or, you know, particularly if you've got new residents coming into an area as well. I think, you know, we recognise that areas change, and when you start your consultation or your community engagement, it may be several years before you're actually, you know, starting to build something, for example, if it's new waste facilities. So it's about being alive to the fact that that community is changing throughout that period, I think.
Absolutely, I think that's a really good point. Sanjay, do you want to pick up on that? Do you find from your experience as well that you know, you end up having different groups from the community suddenly becoming engaged or wanting to be engaged and give their input to your projects at different stages? So you therefore have to keep your sort of consultation program quite flexible and quite fluid. There's a bit of a delay, I think. Sanjay, do we still have you? Okay, well, we don't have Sanjay for a moment.
Joe, can you...
Oh, hello, Sanjay. Good.
Hi, Joe, can you come back with the question once again? I lost your voice in between for a few seconds.
Okay. Sure, sorry about that. I'll go clearly. So
Joe,
Barbara was talking about... Yes. Barbara was talking about through a project, because a waste management project might take a few years from inception through to completion, and that you might have different community groups sort of engaging with you at different points during that program, and so you also find that and therefore find the need that your consultation plan, your engagement plan needs to be flexible and fluid, because even the community that you're in might be changing during the course of the project.
I am completely in agreement that the community plan has to be, community engagement plan has to be very, very flexible. I mean, the moment a plan starts and the moment it gets implemented, particularly landfill improvement plans, it takes years, 3 to 5 years minimum. So it has to be flexible in that way. And also, as experts, I have seen that they come out with one plan at one time in their detailed project report. It changes substantially with some feedback from policymakers, the banks, the funding agencies. So that has to be flexible. One cannot have a very, very rigid plan and getting stuck with that. This is what the plan and this is how we want to do it. And somehow waste management is much more about social engineering. If you want to see it as a success, than more about pure engineering or civil engineering. So in that way, I would say having flexibility is very important. And I can say with great confidence that the same has been true in primary collection. For example, people in developing countries start with push carts or tricycles. They move on to motorized vehicles, then they move on to compactors. And all of these need a different point of time to be flexible, to engage the community at different levels. So I think that's an important point, that you must remain flexible all throughout your planning.
That's interesting. Yes, thank you for that, Sanjay. We've had a question come in from Dr. Adam Reed from AA Ricardo. I'd like to put this to you first, Sanjay. He's asking, are the decision makers listening to the message that community engagement is a priority? Do you think, that decision makers do see it as a priority, or do you think that there's still a sort of reluctance because of the potential risk?
Joe, can you repeat the question once again?
Sure. Are decision makers listening to the message that community engagement is a priority?
Clearly, my answer is in yes, that all waste management plans must have a community engagement system inherent into it. And the primary benefit is that when you share the plan, you have much better participation and ownership than not having it.
Absolutely. I think, Barbara, what do you think in response to that question?
I agree completely as well. I think certainly in large sort of waste projects in this country, we're seeing it to be a requirement that you engage the community early on in the process, and needing to demonstrate that you're engaging the community and engaging the community so meaningfully. You're not just sending out a few leaflets and saying you've engaged the community. So I'd agree with that. I think though you have to guard against sort of thinking this is just a numbers game. I think that's the difficulty is engaging with people. There might not be hundreds of thousands of people interested in your project. You might think there might be, but there may not be. So I think there's a need to make a distinction between engaging properly and thoroughly, but recognizing that if that doesn't mean you get inundated with requests to be involved and participation, that doesn't necessarily mean that engagement process has been a failure. It might be it's too early, it might be people want to get engaged at a later point, or it might be that they've got other priorities. There might be another big development for something else completely unrelated up the road to you, and that might be having an impact on their involvement in your project. So I think it's about being live to that, and being clear about that. Yeah. I think some kind of plan, Sanjay talked about having a plan, a sort of statement of community involvement, or some kind of, I don't know, statement of community consultation, that kind of thing. I think that can help at the outset to set the framework for what you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Sanjay, what level of planning do you undertake for your community involvement activities? Do you plan it sort of from the word go? As soon as a project is proposed, do you set about writing a plan for how you will involve the community? Or is it something that happens later on in the project, once a proposal has been sort of, designed in a bit more detail?
If I have to write an DPR, it will have a detailed project report for waste management. It will have a chapter on community engagement or stakeholder engagement, for sure.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that in developing countries, if your intentions are good and you want to do something very positive for the community, this is an essential part. I've seen many projects, particularly projects which are in the nature of waste to energy, and particularly incineration type of projects, where the incidence of failure of such projects are high. You will see there was hardly any community engagement. For some reason, neither the municipality wanted to share this information, neither the private companies. Even if there was a process of EIA, environmental impact assessment, for processing waste, it was somehow scuttled or it got manufactured, and it did not succeed. I still believe many of such projects could have been succeeded much better, or you would have got a very good opinion about the community, whether they want to accept it or they don't want to accept it, and that you would have saved millions of dollars for the company as well as for the municipality. So I'd just put a chapter on community engagement in any, whether it's for primary waste collection or whether it's processing or disposal. I would think that as an inherent part of a good plan.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I completely agree. From like just briefly from my experience in the UK of doing community involvement for particularly for maybe contentious waste infrastructure projects like incinerators. The first step for me in trying to engage the community is actually to give them information about what the different about what the challenge is and why we need, you know, a new facility that's not a landfill site, for example, and then B, talking to them about what the options are and how the various different technologies work, so that then when you put to them, you know, this is the technology that the council has selected for whatever reason, they're more familiar with it. Because I find otherwise a lot of the time I see consultations or consultation questions, and I just think, oh my goodness, it's actually quite a complicated question for people to ask if they don't have the background information to make that decision. And what do you think, Barbara?
I think you know, it's important to be able to accept responses, you know, in written format, but that are not necessarily, you know, maybe somebody's only answered one of your questions or commented on one aspect. I think it's important to be able to do that, and also to speak in a language and write things in a language and explain things as clearly as you can. We use, for example, video quite often, an illustrative video for some of our work, because that's, you know, it's hopefully clearer than if we have a great long document that people have got to plough their way through. So certainly in our most recent consultation we had several levels of information. So the sort of initial level that was an entry level just about the project, so that people could dip in, and if they're not interested then they can kind of not engage, or they can if they want to. And then different levels where going down to very detailed technical documentation, so that some people and some groups will engage at that very detailed levels, some will pick on certain other aspects. So I think it's important to think about your audience really when you're developing these kind of engagement strategies, and make sure that the information and the way you communicate, whether that's both face-to-face or written or online, is appropriate and relevant to the people that you're talking to. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and Sanjay, what sort of channels do you use to get this information across to people before you run a consultation? If you need to inform people about technologies or about legislation or environmental problems or whatever, do you provide that information in different levels so that people can access it in a way that suits them?
Just to announce a small bit of information regarding the same. The collaborative working group community of practice, which works on basically middle and low income country, that they are developing a decision makers tool which will help them take a decision whether a particular technology is good or not. The tool is being designed in such a way that anybody who reads it and poses some question to the consultant or to the municipality or to the company can get some idea whether this is a suitable technology or appropriate technology for their kind of waste, their kind of population, their kind of environment or not. One thing is that probably everybody will not be interested in knowing everything about the plan.
No,
so
exactly.
One must have a different layers of information. A decision maker or a bank who has to fund the technology is primarily interested whether the technology is viable, whether it can give a return or not. To a mayor, he is primarily worried whether it can solve his waste management dumping problem or not. To the community, they would like to see what its social and environmental benefits are. So I will rather channelize different information to different stakeholders, but at the same time, I will kind of give you an overview. So I'm not trying to give partial truth to everybody without telling the whole of the truth. So I mean, I'll engage at different level, but at the same time, everybody will have an overview of what we are kind of proposing it. And I will definitely use different mediums.
What mediums do you find work most successfully? You mentioned face-to-face earlier, so you would get a team of people together and go out and engage people directly. What other methods do you find work for you, Sanjay?
Well, in developing countries context, I still find that face-to-face, for some reason, people have ample time. If you have communicated it well, that what you intend to do, people tend to attend meetings, to make a presentation, they have a chance to interact with them, ask questions, provide suggestions, feedback, and if they object, they also have a chance to say that we don't like this, I don't think it will work. With other kind of communications like banners, pamphlets, PowerPoint presentations, short documentaries, it becomes more of a one-way kind of thing, where information is presented and you really don't know that its acceptability in the community or not. So speaking particularly in the context of developing countries, I would still prefer my #1 channel as face-to-face interactions, and then I will move to another layer of medium, which can be less face-to-face, but it still provides information.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. I mean, I was at the International Solid Waste Association conference in Antwerp a couple of weeks ago, as I know you were, Sanjay, as well, even though we didn't meet there. But I went to one session that was talking a lot about the growth of social media, and in the end, the room was quite split over whether social media was these days the most appropriate channel through which to engage people. But I find from my own experience, you can't beat face-to-face. And from what Sanjay, from what you're saying as well, you have a similar experience in developing countries. What do you think, Barbara? What's your experience? What would, if you could have one or the other, what would you go for?
That's a difficult one. I think face-to-face is definitely, it personalises a project. I think that for me is the benefit of it. And as Sanjay said, it allows people to ask questions interactively, and you can spend as long or as little with somebody as they wish. It's very responsive to their needs, whereas, you know, sometimes if you're in email dialogue with somebody, or they are reading something online and it's out of hours, they can't get that immediate response. They may be able to through Twitter, for example, or Facebook, but you kind of don't, sometimes you miss the nuance of really what the issue is with what somebody's asking, I think. So I think it's face-to-face is an essential part of it. Yeah, I do think that, yeah. Not the only thing, but I do think that. And for example, if I look at our work on prevention work, a large part of that, we probably aim to have something like 10,000 conversations a year just on kid waste alone, because we feel that face-to-face is the way to go with that particular, which is more a behaviour change approach, but it's still engaging people in waste issues. So, yeah. We do a lot of face-to-face work.
Okay. And Sanjay, if we look at your approaches to engagement, then do you think that face-to-face is perhaps 60% of your engagement approach, or more?
Well, probably a little more than that. Probably 3/4 of my engagement in waste management planning is face-to-face. I'll give you the very, very recent example. A city in Coimbatore with 1.2 million population. We're running this Guinness Book of World Records campaign on organizing the largest mass recycling program, and we ran out of little bit of money. And so what we did, we prepared a nice, crazy presentation, and we sent different guys, very good at communication. And this was kind of recorded presentation. you can just open the presentation, listen to it, and make your decision. At the end of the day, we had just 3 people who came forward to sponsor it. We decided to do a second round of it, but with a different kind of presentation, whether a person went there, made the presentation, explained why it is being done, explained what Guinness Book of World Records requirements are, and we had 13 sponsors in a single day. The IT companies asked, why do you want to do it? What is your vision? How does it help us? What the city benefits? They are CSR funds and they did not know where to utilize it. A face-to-face interaction telling that we are going to go for a Guinness Book of World Records just changed it. The Prezi did not do it. The recorded Prezi. I may be biased in this when I'm saying that, but that's what the results were, 3 and 13, and we get more money than we required actually.
That's a good story.
That's what you think that, Barbara. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
just to tell you, long back there was a study in England where they did what works in waste management in terms of what kind of communication. And it is still said that door-to-door campaign or door-to-door communication with physical interaction had much higher impact in terms of segregation than any other methods of communication in waste management. I exactly don't remember who the author was of that study, but I definitely remember the result.
Interesting. So, Barbara, are there any questions that you would like to ask Sanjay or Sanjay's Barbara about? You know, obviously you're doing quite similar work, and the similarities are really quite striking, aren't they?
One question I wanted to ask was, do you use other people to spread the message for you at all? So if you're engaging on a project or a plan, have you used community people to almost become like ambassadors for you or not?
I mean, see, one thing is very clear. In developing countries, there is a lot of unemployment. So getting ambassadors through, say, cities have eco clubs or nature clubs, or you simply call up a meeting and say, this is what we want to do, who can volunteer? So I do think that these kind of communications do work when you are doing it face-to-face, physical interactions, going and meeting people. The same thing probably may not be very interesting when you are making an advertisement or putting a banner. So I would say that I mean, having ambassadors is very important. In many of the cases, by hook or crook, we made ambassadors the elected ward members. In India, they have, or even in Sri Lanka, a similar British system, where they have elected ward members to kind of monitor and organize more volunteers. And they kind of work for a certain duration as ambassadors to the program. And that has worked much better, even much better than appointing consultants, let me tell you very frankly.
Yeah, thank you.
I have one question, Joe, to Barbara.
Please.
My question is very simple. In my experience in India and many other developing countries, including Africa, the high-income group is very reluctant to have these face-to-face communications, often citing the reason of no time or it's not a matter that is worth attending a meeting. How do you manage? You said that it's important for all the classes. How do you manage engaging with the high-income community or influential communities into waste management plans?
I think that's about really us trying to offer different approaches to engagement. So if people who are time poor, irrespective of income, if they are time poor, the importance is to offer ways in which they can get the information quickly and easily and absorb it easily and understand how they can get involved. They may not be able to get involved as an ambassador or in a face-to-face way, or come along to a meeting, but they may be able to do something online when they're on the train or something like that. The other tactic I've certainly found recently is people have said, we haven't got time to come to your consultation exhibition or your the event you're holding, but will you come to us? And so we always try and make sure we'll go out to existing meetings that groups might be having, so not necessarily something that's specifically about our project, but if they are time poor but they attend other meetings, we do work, for example, in schools, not about infrastructure projects necessarily, but other work that we're doing in schools, and quite often we'll try and engage parents and guardians in the playground, you know, because parents are time poor. So for us it's about trying.
Okay, Barbara, I think we've lost you for a moment there. You've frozen. Hopefully we'll get you back before the end of the session. We've only got a few minutes left. Are you there, Barbara? We still got you? No, I think we've lost Barbara for a moment. So, Sanjay, do you think, I mean, listening to what Barbara was saying there about how they engage people who are time poor in London, do you think that's an approach that could work in developing countries in terms of going to where they are, if there are meetings, that sort of thing, they're trying to access them in places where they go to already?
I'm sure, but not how much sure I am about it in terms of degree. I lost a bit of the concluding part of Barbara's suggestion. The interesting thing why I asked the question, when we approached the high-income communities in India for the Guinness Book, they were very reluctant to participate. They didn't turn up. But when it came to financial contribution, they were much more willing for short meetings, concrete suggestions that we need this, and they came forward and they gave us a lot of money. So for me, the contradiction is that these guys are ready to contribute money but not ready to contribute. So probably, as Barbara said, we'll have to think what is in it for them and how much time we can buy for such a thing. Probably we cannot do the same level of physical interaction with them as with the low-income communities, but probably we can approach for a different reason with a different demand, and they will be much more willing to do so.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you both so much. Barbara, thank you for rejoining us just in time to close off, actually. So you've both mentioned some resources that I'd like us to share online afterwards, which I think we'll be able to post the links to. But if you've got 30 seconds each, is there anything that any final point that you'd like to make very briefly, please? Barbara?
The last point I'd make would be sort of to respect the views of different people. They may all have different views and they may disagree with each other, but it's about having respect for the fact that they've taken the trouble to engage in your project, and that is something that you have to say is a great thing. It's good. Yeah.
Thank you. Interesting. And Sanjay, one final point from you.
For me, very definite point is to engage with the community. You will save a lot of time, lot of money, and probably have a higher rate of success than not getting the communities engaged in their own plan. I fundamentally believe that any waste management plan is for the betterment of the community, and the community has an inherent interest to participate into it. It's just the way we devise it and communicate it.
That's brilliant, thank you. So I think, sorry Barbara, go on finally.
I was just going to say, we all produce waste, so I think we all have a say in, how we plan for it.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. Great. So I think, I mean, in conclusion, really, waste is very much a universal issue. We all produce it. We all ultimately have to have some connection with how that waste is collected and treated and managed within our communities. And it's been really fascinating for me, and I hope for the other listeners in our audience and for both of you to see actually how similar the contexts are, whether you're in a wealthy country or a developing country, and that actually that involving the community is one of the best ways to reduce risk to your project, and that the earlier you can engage with as many different groups in the community as possible, then the more likely your project is to be successful. So, as I said earlier, we will be sharing links both from Sanjay and Barbara about the things that they've discussed. Hopefully, some links to case studies and that sort of thing as well. And that's going to be it from us. So, thank you to Ranjit and everybody Wastewise for organising the Global Waste Dialogue, and thank you very much, Barbara Herridge and Sanjay Gupta. It's been really wonderful having you join, and that's it. We'll call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.